Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Todd's podcast. This is going to be posted a day or two after the official beginning of the hurricane season here in Florida. And our guest today is Paul Womble. He's the Emergency Management Director for Polk County, and he was selected and put in that position, elevated that position in 2018. While working alongside local, state, and federal agencies, he's in charge of preparing, coordinating, and responding to a diverse array of emergencies and disasters, including hurricanes, pandemics, and other hazards. Operating out of the Polk County Emergency Operations Center located in Winter Haven, Paul ensures safety, preparedness, and the well-being of our citizens. He's responsible for the operations of the county emergency 911 system and addressing programs, which I did not know, and as well as the emergency management program. He's been deployed around the state, responding to several major storms, including Hurricanes Floyd, Charlie, Katrina, Matthew, and Adelia. He's not just been deployed around the state, but he's gone all over the country with different deployments and helping help disasters that are there. Paul's a fourth-generation Polk County native and holds an associate degree from Polk Community College, a bachelor's degree from St. Petersburg College, and a master's of emergency and crisis management from the University of Central Florida. He's a certified emergency manager, Florida professional emergency manager, master exercise practitioner, and a certified public manager. Paul, welcome.
Thank you, Todd.
How'd I do on the introduction?
That sounds...
Was I pretty accurate?
Sounds pretty impressive.
All right, good. Well, I appreciate that. So thanks for coming in today. And I know what you do is more than just hurricanes, responding to hurricanes. It could be chemical spills. It could be any disaster, natural or man-made, as you're the main guy here in Polk County. But today I probably want to concentrate more on the hurricanes since we just began the hurricane season. So the first question is, you're the county's emergency management director. Is there one of you in every county? Is that mandated by state law? Or are we lucky because we have you because Polk County is so big? Do they do regionals? How do they do that around the state?
No, each county by statute is required to have an emergency management program, and that program is required to have a director. And it just went to the governor yesterday. There was legislation passed this session that will, assuming he's going to sign it, will be set requirements for both training, 200 hours of various classes, and disaster experience. So that's new. It solidifies, Florida, unfortunately, we have a long disaster history, and we've learned lessons, I think, hopefully.
We have. We're much better now than we used to be.
Move that needle forward and just making emergency management a priority, and this just kind of takes it to the next level by setting some criteria of who can be in that position.
By statute, do they tell what kind of staff you have to have? Are you the only one statutorily created, and then you, depending on the size and sophistication and level of your area, do you get to pick what size staff you decide to create?
Oh, I wish I could. I wish I had that power. No, it's you have a program. Each county's got to have a program. Each county's got to have a director. And across the state, there are the majority of us as county directors are within the public safety area section of the county, but not all. A couple of them are under maybe under the fire department. I think there's 6 or 7 where the EM director is actually part of the sheriff's office, but those are generally the smaller, more rural counties
where they might be wearing more than one hat anyway.
Yeah, they do. It's they meet the intent of the statute, but a lot of what they do is EM is not the primary. That's other duties as assigned.
So we have listeners primarily from Polk and Central Florida, but we have them from the Keys all the way to the Panhandle, and we have some from around the state. From around the country. Is your position mandated state by state, or is it all left up to the state? If you're in Georgia, we may or may not have a EMS director, or maybe North Carolina does, but not South Carolina.
It's like local government. It's different. In Texas, for example, county judges have many of the same authority, and actually more, as the judge. In Texas, the county judge is in charge when there's a disaster. So it's like any other government. It's just different around our country.
But see, I kind of look at what you're doing as a skill position. You've got the training, and if they're not training judges or some of the others around Texas or wherever it may be, yeah, they may have the authority and maybe they've got the last word and there's a committee that reports up to them. But I kind of like having you and your team with the extra training that you go through to be able to competently administer management services and the response.
Yeah, we eat, breathe, and sleep emergency management all year, as opposed to senior and elected officials. They don't just think about us, which is good.
Right.
But all the other factors in our community, and then when an emergency comes along, then they engage. But that's just the way it works. So our job is to be the expert all the time and stay up on policies and changes and make sure that the county's ready.
They don't think about you all the time, but when the need arises, they focus on you. I can assure you of that. So,
yeah.
And you guys always step up. So there's talk of a hurricane coming, not now, I'm just saying hypothetically. When do you start really paying attention once it leaves Africa, since most of them seem to come that way, or in the Gulf, or when it's like, hey, they're 2 weeks out, we're still kind of watching, or when do you start triggering different levels of your response?
So, this time of the year, we'll watch all the time. Really for us here in Polk County, it takes really 6 or 7 days, 5 or 6 days, somewhere, about a week, right? Because, what do we have to do then? Well, we have people doing their normal jobs, which is all across the spectrum. So we've got to get them, hey, there's something coming, you've got to change gears. And in this case, go into hurricane mode, which, all local governments have plans and procedures, but they have to shift their focus from all the other things, development and roads and everything else that local governments thinking about and working on day to day, services to our citizens. And they got to switch. They got to switch into gear, into hurricane mode. So that takes 2 or 3 days to get ready. So really, at about day 5 for us is when we have to start taking actions to start getting things in place if the storm really is coming here.
So when it's triggered that you've got to staff up, I mean, your staff is what, 5, 6 people normally?
In the emergency management
right.
program itself,
right.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, when the hurricane hits and when it's coming in, you start bringing people in. Who are you bringing in, and what's their training?
Yeah, so everything we do, my job's about relationships,
right.
partnerships, and as you know, in Polk County, we all get along, we all work well together, especially in an emergency. So I have staff that report to me and directly, as much as I can, oversee the Emergency Operations Center. I don't have shelters, for example. That's a partnership with the Polk County School Board, because we use their schools,
right.
their staff. So they're one of the very first calls I make to either the assistant superintendent or the superintendent and say, hey, this thing's about a week away. And we'll start watching the forecast, and that determines when we would open shelters, where shelters would
Do
be.
most counties rely on the school boards, their school boards in their respective counties to provide that service?
Most do. We've had volunteer agencies in the past that had that role and responsibility, but it's probably been close to a decade now that volunteerism is down just for various factors. So across the state of Florida, local governments and school boards and others, but generally those local governments are the ones that are staffing hurricane shelters.
So when you're reading in the paper or hearing the news about different schools wanting to harden their whether it's the library or the gym or whatever, I mean, that's a good thing, because the more opportunities and options that are out there, the closer people can shelter to their home is better for everybody. There's less people on the road. They can get home sooner after the event goes through. And do you think we're an anomaly with how well everyone gets along versus the stuff that you hear around? Or do you think once a disaster comes, people are pretty much on the same team, and after it's done, they kind of go back to perhaps whatever infighting they may have?
I'll just say Polk County as a whole, every day, agencies, organizations, not just government,
right,
private sector and volunteer faith-based, just generally get along and work together. There's been examples in other parts of Florida where that's not the case. an elected official and a county manager are, they publicly disagree on who's got authorities to do what and who's in charge. And
Yeah.
we just don't roll that way here. It makes my job easier. I talk to my peers around the state frequently and talk about some of the things we do and day to day interface with, as you know, we've got 17 cities. And so the county and the cities work together on a whole host of things. So on whether that's roads or parks or whatever it might be, but when there's a storm coming, that just, we all know each other.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to just the need for a professional management, professionally trained people like yourself and your team. If you get an elected official who comes in and not necessarily grandstanding, they may have great motives behind them, but they don't know what they're doing, they can really muck things up a bit by trying to take over. And the position I was in is, hey, we've got professional management, whether it's you and your team, Pete and his team when I was there, Bill Beasley at the county now, Freeman when you were there. If you're smart as an elected official, you will let the trained professionals run things, and you will be there to support them and get them what they need.
Yeah, and that's the part of our job. What is the role of elected officials? And many times they will not understand there are formal processes and formal ways to get things. Right. And, unfortunately, a lot of that is federal, understanding the federal requirements. Because at the end of the day, at some point, then you have to start worrying about the money end and eligible end and all those.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Things. Yeah, that's not the best part of my job.
But you had mentioned the roles of the nonprofits, the churches, the Red Crosses, and you've had a nice tenure with the Red Cross, so I'm sure you hold them very near and dear. I think they're vitally important to hurricane response, and I've seen them, up close and personal and how they do. Are those relationships that you're cultivating 365 days a year? Do you bring them out for special training, or once it gets 3 days out, you bring them in for, hey, here's your crash course and what you got to do, and this is what we're doing?
No, we do an annual training. We're probably 2/3 of the way through our normal readiness for hurricane season, which, bring all the stakeholders, who's assigned to the EOC, yep. Which, and we have to plan for, 24 hours operations for weeks on end. And so it's not just one person from an agency. So, and they may have never been in the building. They may be new. How do we work? How do we operate? What's different when we're activated? If the county declares a local state of emergency, what does that mean? It modifies procurement rules and get some government regulations set aside so we can do what we need to do to respond and not be bogged down by red tape, quite frankly. But people just need to understand the environment that we work in. So yeah, lots of annual training. That's across the board. Right. The cities, all the constitutional folks, every agencies, everybody. And
has that cooperation, has that training really come about the last 20 years or so, you would think, because of the Gene, Francis, and Charlie that came through and put a whack on everybody?
Going back before 2004, which is 20 years ago this year, all the preparedness work was done, but having 3 storms in one season, built relationships that were, validated. I think relationships may be a better word, and it still holds true today. I mean, this Polk County was, it was a bad summer.
We were battle tested,
and we learned, and that's been passed down through senior leaders and others and in key positions that many weren't even around 20 years ago.
And you had mentioned when you staff up, I noticed that when I was there and went through Irma, I think it was a hurricane I got at the end of my tenure there, I walk in once we were activated and I look over and the 2 executive assistants who took care of the 5 county missioners are there answering the phones. I said, what are you doing? They said, this is what we do. When the storms come, we're all cross-trained, and some have different skill levels than others, but some are answering the phone and just directing phone calls. And I think people don't fully appreciate when you all lock things down, y'all are there in the building for days. And I don't think people also realize y'all have families at home that you or the other people on your team are not home helping take care of them. And so they're having to go through this without perhaps the main person in the family that would normally take care of that. And I don't think people fully appreciate the stress and the duress that y'all go through. I'm quite confident they don't appreciate the training that y'all have gone through to make it easier. But, people need to have patience and understanding. If someone maybe answers the phone, maybe they're a little short. Well, maybe they haven't seen their family, or maybe their family got hit pretty hard by the storm and it bypassed someone else. So
Yeah,
I think the team is a bunch of unsung heroes that work with you guys.
well, that's good recognition. It's true. Every Board of County Commissioner employee has a disaster. I call it the disaster job. It's their disaster role. Some may be
Everyone.
Some may be what they do day to day. Fire rescue, for example. But there's you mentioned the administrative folks from the commissioner's office or the county manager's office. If there's a storm coming, they have a different job.
Right.
Answering phones, calling our special needs clients, and you're right. We will be in the EOC with a full complement of the team and representatives of all of those functions that we need to manage the disaster when the storm comes.
And we're such a big county. There's different locations where you guys set up. And I was talking to Kay Suggs, one of my executive assistants, for a while, just a week or so ago, and talking about preparedness and coming up. And, she said recently she was called somewhere up in Davenport or Haines City. And I'm thinking, I never thought about there being anywhere other than the mothership right there at DOC. There's other places where staff goes and
there's other things. We have, and again, the school mentioned school board and shelters, county parks and leisure services. They take the lead on distribution of water and food after a storm. So county employees are trained for that, and they work with city parks folks, for example. So there's just a lot of functions that have to happen, and we don't have people just sitting around waiting on a storm to only have a disaster job. So we pull from all areas of the county.
Todd's podcast is sponsored in part by SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate. Since 1996, the firm has offered unrivaled brokerage services throughout Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. With over 90 expert advisors throughout the region, our team has the knowledge and resources to help clients realize their most ambitious real estate investment goals. When you choose SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate, you have access to a diverse suite of commercial and land services, including forestry consulting, land management, auctions, property management, commercial leasing, and negotiating conservation easements. If you're seeking to invest in land or explore commercial real estate opportunities in the Southeast, contact us today at svnsaunders.com or call 877-518-5263 to connect with an advisor today. Once again, that's svnsaunders.com or by phone at 877-518-5263.
Sandbags. People probably take that for granted. Is that a fire rescue function primarily, or is it wherever it's wherever roads, the county will roads and drainage?
The infrastructure group, so roads and drainage specifically, and that's another good example. If there's a potential or forecast for flood, those folks. Jay Jarvis is the division director, and they bought some equipment to pre-fill bags, but those folks are going to work right up until the time the storm gets here to make that available to the citizens. And then, oh, by the way, as soon as the storm is done, they have to assess roads and infrastructure. And then Jay's group leads the process to pick up all the debris, and that could last for months and months.
It does, depending on the severity of the storm. And the debris removal, you just touched on that. Who negotiates the cleanup contracts? I know they're negotiated in advance. Is that under you? Is that under the manager's office? Is it under Jay with transportation? And
so another excellent example of how we all get along in Polk County. Of the 17 cities, we have interlocal agreements with all but Lakeland, and it's simply just to coordinate the effort of those contracts. And that whole process is based on FEMA regulations, and it's about debris is going to be the most expensive thing local government expense. Irma, $40 million.
Yes.
For example, to clean up all of the debris in the county, other than Lakeland. So, but yeah, so my job is to make sure we have functions and things in place. But that doesn't mean that I do them all. It's got to make sure that folks understand the federal world and emergency management, and that's a good example. So, all of those cities work together with Jay and his team at Roads and Drainage, just to make sure the things get picked up and the certain things that have to be due to make sure we're ready.
So what I noticed of going through Irma and that storm is, one, Jim Freeman said, it'll bring out the best in people and it'll bring out the worst in people. And he was very true. And what I noticed is when the storm prepares, everyone's kind of on edge. Every few hours, whenever a new report comes out for the track, you're saying, please go right, please go left, wherever. So once the hurricane comes through, if you look and you don't have a tree through your roof and, your family's safe and your whatever safe, you say, okay, do I still have power? If you got power, you've made it through 90% of the hurricane.
Oh, yeah.
And if you got power, then you're good. And then, hey, can I get out of my driveway? If you can, you're about 98% there. But there are people that are severely damaged and that can't, and they're just, homes are destroyed or whatever. And during Irma, I got a call from a fella. I had the northeast part of Polk County. He's north of I-4. And he said, it's been 2 weeks. I got palm fronds that are down in my yard. When are you going to have the garbage guys come pick it up? And I said, first, every tree up there has been planted, so I knew it was a palm tree or something. It was not a big stately oak. I said, if you would like to drive to Bartow or Fort Meade with me and look at these 100-year-old oak trees that are laying in people's living rooms or laying, on their pool enclosure, or laying across the road, come down and take a look. But your problem's not that big. I know it's important to you, but we got life safety issues that we're dealing with, and picking up an 8-foot piece of privacy fence or some palm fronds. I said, we'll get to it when we get to it. So just have a little patience. So.
Yeah, that's right. What Freeman said was correct. But with the county has grown and new people have moved here, and they may not understand.
And they've never been through one.
No, never been through one, and they don't know. That's expectation management. That's the other big part of what our job is. So, yeah, patience. We do our best. Government can't do it all. That's why we have the private sector and the volunteer groups. There's things going on private property, for example. We're not allowed to.
HOAs.
Yeah, you can't go in a HOA. It's unfortunately, at the end of the day, a lot of that's because of laws and the legal end. And
well, you can go in them, but you just have to have a letter from the president saying, yes, you have the right to come in and do this.
That's the government bureaucracy that we have to work through. And unfortunately, we just have to do the right thing. We always do the right thing, and that's part of it. So, not going to be, I don't know if we're supposed to endorse a particular vendor here, but I call it the Amazon Prime mentality.
Right.
And, everybody wants everything right now. It's just our culture now. Right. 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. But it's certainly our culture today, and we just can't snap our fingers or, flip the switch and we're back to normal. It's still a disaster. And yeah, you're right. There's parts of the county. Hurricane Charlie was a good example. It was a bad day on the ridge on the eastern side of the county. We
never had bad days since 1962.
No, it had been a long time. But you could still here in Lakeland. You could go out. Restaurants were open and movie theaters were open, and you could go get a steak. But you couldn't do that in downtown Lake Wales or in Dundee or in Davenport. So even because we're so big, what happened in our county and our fellow Polk Countyans, it's not the same everywhere.
And I think the path that the hurricane takes is so critical to how quickly we recover. Irma started down south, the Keys, Miami, wherever, and went straight up the entire body of Florida.
Right.
And so normally a hurricane may come across the state and the southern counties can send resources to the central part, or the northern can come to central, or central could go south or north or wherever. But this thing whacked the entire state, basically.
That's right.
And so all these resources that were typically distributed by a region were now statewide. And debris removal was delayed everywhere. And Polk County, in my opinion, we positioned ourselves quite well, and it still took a long time. And, you know, that people don't fully understand that. People, power companies, fire, rescue, everywhere, they will come from all over the country, you know, when the aid is required, just as you and different folks of your team have gone across the country, Hurricane Sandy or Superstorm Sandy or whatever. And I think people don't fully understand and appreciate the cooperation, not just between the governments, but between the people as well, and the private sector who comes in to restore power or haul the debris.
Yeah, Irma, in terms of resources, Irma was truly statewide. And yeah, we
hated that storm.
We go help. Yeah, me too. We go help each other. That's
right.
The deployments you mentioned at the beginning. That's what that is. And after 2004 and Hurricane Charlie, all kind of folks came here to help Polk County. And that's, that's still a lesson learned that we remember, we pay that back. We pay that forward.
Right.
And you've seen the sheriff send his folks, they were on Fort Myers Beach. No, I had some of my folks, the radio services, we deploy with the Sheriff's Office Task Force. Fire Rescue is part of that. Happy to go help other people, but you have to make sure home is taken care of first. And in the case of Irma, everybody got hit.
Right.
So, we're not going to send our resources to some other part of the state until we know we're whole here at home and our citizens are taken care of.
And something that I discovered, I think it was during Irma, and I never ever thought about it. I was talking to Trish Pfeiffer, who is now a city commissioner in Bartow. And
so just got
right,
anointed as the mayor.
Yeah, okay. Congratulations, Trish. And I think she might have been when Irma hit as well. But I remember her saying, hey, we've got the emergency workers who are coming down, whether they're power workers or whoever, we've got them staged in gyms. We need people to wash their clothes because they're down here for 10 days, 14 days. And all of a sudden, at some point, their jeans are filthy or their T-shirts are filthy. And I never, ever thought about how to take care of those folks. So it just the big pull that everyone has to get behind and do is just phenomenal. And I think we do it well in quite well in Polk County. And I think they do it quite well across the state. And I think we do learn, and we're much farther down the road than we used to. So what role does the sheriff's office, first responders, fire rescue, I know their mentality is they want to stay out till the absolute last minute. And it's almost an act of God pulling some of those men and women who are just so used to helping people say, it's now time for you to take care of yourself, hunker down, we'll call you when it passes and it's safe. I think they do a phenomenal job, and, it's a sexier position than being a staff person answering the phone, but they do a wonderful job for us as well.
Yeah, they do. And, again, going back to Charlie, Polk County in 2004 put paramedics in a deputy's car when the storm was almost here or just after, hadn't cleared yet, high winds, not safe for those high profile vehicles. And, at some point the ambulances can't respond. It's just not safe. Same thing with buses, either Citrus Connection or school board buses. At some point, it's just not safe because of the winds. But the sheriff's office and fire rescue, they still responded in the storm. Were credited 20 years ago of getting people to the hospital that the doctors, ER doc said, if you hadn't got them here, they would have died.
Yeah.
And we still do those things today. That's part of the county's plan.
Citrus Connection does the same thing. The bus system. They're pulling people and taking them to shelters, the shut-ins. I mean, it's just So when you guys lock down at the EOC, where does your team sleep? Where do they shower? Where do they take breaks? I know Dawn DeCaminata is a friend of mine that was working at the county. I don't know if you remember her.
Yep.
Bit of a troublemaker. And she used to just douse herself with this stuff called patchouli. It's had a kind of a funky odor, but I joke with Dawn because I can. But, you've got people that might be locked down for 3-4 days at a time. How do you take care of their needs while they are out there? You can't stay awake for 3 days. You got to sleep. You got to eat. You got to take a shower.
Well, luckily we don't get to practice that very often, but we plan for it. So, we're able to prepare food.
Bring in cots.
No, sleeping bag, air mat, a cot. Yeah, they can. We don't have dedicated bunk space. It's not like everybody has certainly a private suite.
No,
you're in offices or
it's a slumber party.
Hallways. I call it camping at the EOC. You just don't have a tent. But yeah, again, we bring in the team, especially if in the forecast of a major hurricane.
Right.
It's going to be a really bad day. We have to have the folks we need to begin to respond in the building before the storm gets here, because if it's bad and you just can't get to the EOC because of power lines down and flooded roads and trees down, that can't be an excuse for us to not to, begin responding, taking care of our folks.
So if someone's saying, how can I help? If I'm a private citizen, I've made it through the hurricane, I made it through the storm, I didn't get touched, my power's still on, I've got water. How can people help the EOC and the folks that are there? Can they bring food? Do you not want them to bring food? Is there a fund they can contribute to? Do you want massages for everybody? Just to help them sleep or whatever? What can the normal citizens do during tough times like that for y'all?
We generally would not accept food donation. And I'm sure they're fine.
I understand,
but we just can't risk, something that might not be, food allergies. Wasn't kept the temperature,
Right.
The last thing we do is want to make the team
sick.
in the building sick. So we have a mechanism for unaffiliated volunteers, homeschool groups,
right,
whatever they are. If somebody wants to help, the county has a way to facilitate volunteer placement. But certainly is with your church, with your community group, with whatever,
go through that channel.
That's the best, because honestly, volunteer organizations, again, can get a lot more done more quickly
and more efficiently
without the government bureaucracy and red tape that we still have to go through. And we can't do it all. And all those services out in the community, in the areas that really need all the help they can get. For us, the United Way, you ask about donations, cash donations in any disaster, whether that's something happens here, if you see something, tornadoes in Oklahoma yesterday, don't clean out your closet and donate your fur coats and your Halloween costumes and the shirts that don't fit anymore. That's not, while the intent is certainly appreciated.
They may just need water and food and no meat.
And getting cash into the hands of agencies, in this case, generally volunteer nonprofit. So here in Polk County, that would be ran through United Way of Central Florida. They have a partnership through their normal network and certainly with some of the other big community foundations to take that money and be able to make sure it goes to the people in Polk County that need help.
Hey, this is Captain Nate Shaka Khan from NOAA's Aircraft Operations Center. Hope you enjoyed Todd's podcast today, and thanks for listening.
Let's talk a little bit about the role of the press. I know there's a press room out there. They have a job to do as well. You're able to not have them in the main EOC room because you don't want them disrupting, but they can still report. I think that's a pretty cool room that you've got, that they're tied in. They can set their trucks up out. Who came up with that idea? We want them with us, but they can't be amongst us, is maybe a good way to put it.
Well, lesson learned from the 2004 hurricane season. And in 2004, what really was back then was known as the ROC, Recovery Operations Center, was the big room at the W.H. Stewart Center. If the listeners are familiar with the youth fair or anything else there in South Bartow, it was just one big room. And the media was, their cameras were, they were right there in the middle of all the activity for the 6 weeks that things were run out of that building. So we have to have that partnership. A big function that we have, it's a priority. Where's information going? How do we get it out? And we can't do that without the media. Social media has made that easier. We go live on Facebook and X and whatever other platforms we have at the time. So we can get the word out now directly without going through the media, but
they still have a role to play too.
Oh, absolutely. And day to day, you watch the local weather guy or gal, every day. So part of the messaging is somebody that you know and trust the information you're coming from. And when it comes to weather, that's the local TV meteorologist.
Right.
And the news stations have a much larger reach, just by the nature of what they do. So yeah, we want them, and we got a great relationship with the local.
Right.
All the affiliates. We do stuff with them a lot. Where the EOC is, we're close to the sheriff's office, which he's on TV a time or two. So we're able to see, when they're across the street, we see those folks and know them, and yeah, they're in the building and they will stay. One of the affiliates, had somebody, a crew in the building when we locked down for Hurricane Ian, spent the night in the media room. We make them comfortable. They're part of the team at that point.
Right. So the hurricane's on its way. How often do you get updates? Who's in the room when you get updates? Who gives you the updates? I think there are 3, 4, 5, 6 hours from National Weather Service. And I know different reports trigger different actions from you and your team and the SO. And then how does that trigger down to the municipalities?
The Hurricane Center updates every 6 hours,
Okay.
the forecast as to intensity and track. And everything we do is based on when is the weather going to get bad here? When's the rain start? When's the strong wind start? Because that's the point that we want everything done and people off the road. And at that point, hunker down. So yeah, every 6 hours we get an update. We have leadership in the room and we'll have conference calls with the National Hurricane Center and with the state EOC. We talk to our other counties, our neighboring counties. And it's really just making the decisions together. Policy decisions are made. It's a combination of the board chair who represents the board and what we call a policy group, but the county manager and the deputy county managers, the sheriff's in there, the health officer, Dr. Jackson, is there. The school board superintendent, our representative, is in there, and leaders from county government and our constitutionals. So we're making those policy decisions together, and then we talk to the cities every day, conference call with the city every day. They're not all the cities,
Right.
but we have municipal liaisons in the EOC. So we just,
So do you get the call from the state government first because they deal with counties because it's a larger geography, and then you brief the cities, or the cities getting their own briefing from the state, or
No,
is that the responsibility of each county is, hey, you take care of the cities that are in your geography?
that's part of that statute that requires
Okay.
a program and a director at the county level. My authority is countywide. I work for the board, and but again, we work together. So our system is from the local level, so cities up to the county, up to the state, up to the federal government, and then back down is the way processes work. So yeah, we get that information. Obviously, the cities and everybody else see the forecasts. They're making their own plans on what they're doing internally, but we talk with everybody countywide, the chief judge, the universities, all the constitutionals, hospital leadership. We have a conference call every day at noon, just to share information, coordinate. Here's the plan of the day. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're going to do tomorrow. And it lets leaders at that level across the county, coordinate what they do and make sure we're all singing from the same sheet of music.
And most of the organizations have their own disaster plan, and they just need you to give them the most accurate information you can, and then they can then govern themselves accordingly.
Yeah, they should have their own plan, and they need to have their own plan. Our job is just to put all that together, make sure we kind of guide the ship based on the policy set by that policy group, and get ready for the storm, and then ride the storm out. And then as soon as the thing is gone and it's safe, then our mission turns to, well, what happened?
Right.
How bad is it, and where? And with a county this size, with urban to very rural areas, it takes a minute to figure that out. We'll get up in the sheriff's helicopter or fixed wing as soon as we can to see for ourselves, see where flooding is, see where the debris is, and we have processes to collect that information from the cities and our first responders. But we need help. We'll use social media. We have a citizens information line, a phone center that we stand up where people can call and get information and tell us information, because we're in a building in Winter Haven that has 2 windows, and until the storm is gone, we roll down shutters to keep the building safe, and we don't have any way to see outside. So, that process takes about a day, 24 hours or so after the storm. Is there power? Where's the power? We have power companies. You mentioned power. They're either in the building, or we have a hotline, and they've got to let us know, what's your outages and how long is it going to take that's the big question, right? How long is my power going to be out?
My gosh, we have a young woman here, Bridget, who's lost her power. She's a Lakeland Electric, and hers was like the last 30 minutes after Ian to get her power on. And every day she's just frustrated. I mean, she understood, but she was, whatever grid she was on, she was at the end of it. You had mentioned the cleanup. We spent $40 million during Ian. This is FEMA reimbursement.
Correct.
And there's certain things that you have to do to be properly to be reimbursed. But it's not, FEMA doesn't come in and write you a check the next day. I mean, how long did it take to finally, I think we've closed the books on Ian, haven't we, here in Polk County?
Ian, probably not completely.
And that was 2017.
Irma was 17.
I'm sorry, I meant Irma, not Ian.
Irma should mostly be done. Yeah, the county, and I mentioned those agreements with all of the cities except for Lakeland. The county fronts the money.
Right.
We have that capability and that partnership. If you don't follow the FEMA bureaucracy, and picking up debris is a great example of lots of bureaucracy, you won't get your money back. So we'll always respond, certainly with life safety. We will do what we need to do, but we have to be physically conscious as well, because once the response is over, life safety things are stabilized, and we begin recovery, we still have to we're justifiable to our citizenry, the taxpayers, for the money we spend. So we have to make sure we follow the rules as best we can to make sure we get the maximum reimbursement from the federal government.
And I think it's also incumbent upon the elected officials to make sure they act fiscally responsible, so that they have the money to pay the haulers to haul the stuff away and to fix things. I mean, it was a huge deal here in Polk County, and I can't speak highly enough on it. So we've talked a lot about hurricanes. What about a fire if lightning strikes? Is that underneath you as well? I know we've had fires out in the Indian River areas and way far east Polk County.
If when we have those other hazards, other incidents, if it rises to the level of, several days, lots of damage, we have a very robust public safety system in this county, not just Polk County Fire Rescue and the Sheriff's Office, which, as you know from your time on the board and the current board, public safety is the number one priority. We have lots of capabilities. But if they reach the level that, again, especially with things like sheltering, or if there truly are we had, I think the last big fire out in Indian Lake Estates, we ended up with a dozen or so homes that really were destroyed. Then we don't activate the EOC for that, but we'll go in the field. We'll be part of that response and really kind of coordinate the recovery piece, bringing in the Red Cross, for example, and the other volunteer folks. So the function,
Federal wildlife folks.
Yeah. So the functions that we need in a disaster, whether it's countywide, like a hurricane, or an isolated, we had tornadoes in North Lakeland in 2018 and 2019. We had a handful of people come into the EOC and do some assessments and gather up pictures and information. So we were technically activated for those, but the functions we did in the field. Right. We were at the command post with the Sheriff's Office and Fire Rescue. So the functions that we do, we always do. It's just a matter of, is it a big enough incident and going to last long enough to actually do those things in the EOC, or can we do them in the field?
So how does a person that's affected by these storms, how do they get help? Is it call 911 or don't call 911? When a hurricane or something else is, who do they contact?
Well, if it's life safety, fire, damage, somebody's hurt, some kind of injury, and we see that a lot, especially injuries post-storm.
Right.
People cleaning up, power lines were down, they didn't know, flooded roads. So if it's an emergency, 911, 911 is the right answer. If it's not, life safety or those things in our citizens information line, if you need services. But that's where you have to be patient.
But don't call 911 if your electricity's still
No,
out. That's your local.
No, you have to
utility
call your
provider.
power. We got 7 power companies in Polk County, from 3 municipal to co-ops to for profit.
Right.
So you have to know who's your power company and give them a call. We can't help you with that. I can't walk over to the power company representative in the EOC and say, fix Todd's power. I just can't do that.
Or Bridget in that case. I kept telling Bridget, I said, Bridget, we have nothing to do with the power company. That's Lakeland Electric. But I remember Nick Plott, Nick, he took over with Tico.
Yep.
He's their community representative, took over for Cindy Price. And I think the first weekend he started was Hurricane Irma. And I just felt so bad for him. It's like, holy cow, I'm drinking from a fire hose that's turned on wide open. And he's done so well doing it.
And they do. And they have a big job with limited resources to, in Hurricane Charlie in 2004, Lakeland Electric, Lakeland wasn't bad. It was inconvenienced. Lakeland as a whole was not bad, where Lake Wales was bad. But that was different.
Fort Meade got hit on one of them. A little south of where we are now.
Right. But in Irma, Lakeland Electric has some major infrastructure impacts. That does take days to fix that before they can get out to the Bridget at the end of that line. Some people, you're not going to get, that's that Amazon Prime mentality.
Right.
You got to be patient. It's going to take a while. And that's why, having a plan is important. What can't you do today if you go home and you don't have power for any reason? And if it's out, probably can't cook. At some point, your food in your refrigerator or freezer is going to go bad. How do you get information? So that's all, again, part of what citizens, if everybody would just take a little bit and think about some of those things and do a little planning, you'll be much better off.
I remember growing up, and when hurricanes came through, it was, hey, fill the bathtub up with water so you can at least flush your toilets. And it seems like a lot of the municipalities have kind of figured it out. But if you're on well and you have no electric, you really have no water.
Yep.
And it's kind of more important to do that. And when people's electric goes out or their cable goes out, what I've noticed is if I've ever called in, if my power or cable's gone out, they say, yeah, we know what's in your neighborhood, or they've gotten very proactive, and I'll get a call or a text or an email saying, hey, power's out in your area. We think it'll be restored by 7 p.m. or whatever. And so you don't necessarily need to flood their emergency lines either, their power outage lines, and say, hey, I live at 123 Main Street. Can you tell me when my power's coming back on? Because they already know it.
Yeah, as technology has advanced, smart meters and all the other things that we have today, then they know, they want to know. But at some point, the power companies will say, we believe we've restored everybody that can be restored. But if your weatherhead, for example, where the electricity connects to your house, that's the homeowner's responsibility. Right. Power company's responsible up to that weatherhead. So if that's damaged, and you don't have an electrician to fix it, they won't turn you back on, for example. Right. And yeah, you're right about the well. And there's lots of folks that still have wells, especially in the more rural areas of the county. So what are you going to do if they can't get to you and restore you for a week? How are you going to have water to drink, bathe, flush, all those things?
Hey everybody, this is your host Todd Dantzler, and I hope you're enjoying this episode. I would like to take a moment to do a shameless plug for my real estate business. As most of you know, I'm a partner with SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate, but I am also a working broker who is very active in listing and selling real estate. I've been in this business for over 41 years. I know, you're thinking he can't be, he's so young looking, but no, it's true. I've been actively listing and selling commercial real estate my entire working career on properties ranging from ag land to multifamily projects to office and commercial and industrial properties. I have held the distinguished CCIM designation since 1991. This is the highest designation you can achieve in the commercial real estate field. I believe that a big part of my success in the real estate business is because of the relationships that I have fostered throughout the state of Florida and also right here in Polk County. So if you have any real estate needs in buying or selling, please give me a call to see if I can help out. My direct line to my desk is 863-877-2846. Again, that's 863-877-2846. So we've talked about some kind of heavy stuff, and I appreciate you being in here. I want to lighten it up a little bit. And you're a Polk County boy. Grew up in Highland City, fourth generation. You're a big baseball fan. Played baseball as a kid.
Yep.
Did you play in college?
No, stopped after in high school.
In high school. Who's your favorite professional baseball team?
Well, we grew up as Atlanta Braves fans.
Yeah.
We didn't.
Freeman was a Braves fan.
We did not have baseball here
Right.
until the Rays came along. So switched allegiances, I guess, to the locals, but still will follow along the Braves just because of the past.
Are you musical?
I listen to music. I cannot play music, which is much or different than my wife, who sings and plays piano and all these other things, and her kids are very musical. But I grew up and graduated in '89, so the good old days of rock and roll and
Right.
And we skateboarded and BMX, so
Yep.
some punk rock and stuff from the late '80s, early '90s genre is still my jam. Yeah.
So I talked to your wife, Julie, briefly before just to get a little background, and she said your mom was that lady in the stands banging on the cowbell.
Oh yeah.
And I said, oh my gosh, every kid has someone in the stands whose mom or their teammate's mom that's screaming really loud. And
Yep.
And your dad was a coach.
Yeah,
Did he coach you or just coach other kids?
No, my dad ran the league in Highland City for forever. I played ball. My brother came along behind me. So yeah, mom started the cowbell, and she wasn't the only one. Thankfully, it was a thing. But especially with I can vividly remember, and back my dad was a district commissioner and a state commissioner, and they'd go to and the kids, especially my brother's group, they were good, and they went all over the state.
Right.
So of course, cowbells went all over the state too, and that was kind of a Highland City, and then it became known as Lakeland Highlands at some point. That was a Highland City, Lakeland Highlands thing, because they knew those crazy moms were coming with those bells.
Oh my gosh! So you're restoring a '64 VW Bug, I understand.
Yeah, early Volkswagen. Had lots of Volkswagens in my.
Was that your first car growing
career.
up? Or
sort of. Actually, my dad had given me a little pickup truck that he had,
okay.
But at some point, I got bitten by the air-cooled Volkswagen Bug, pun intended.
Right.
So yeah, I got one I've been slowly working on for way too long, but it'll get there soon, I hope.
So when you get it finished, who's your first passenger going to be?
Well, Julie, of course.
Okay, so she set me up for that question. She said, "You tell Paul that I better be the
Oh
first
yeah.
one in the
Oh,
car."
I've heard.
How do you relax once a hurricane has gone through, and you've lived a pressure-packed week, 5 days? It doesn't matter how long, 2 months.
Yeah.
How do you eventually say, okay, I'm going to breathe now. I can breathe now. How do you relax? How do you tell your other people on the team to relax, to kind of get some normalcy back in your mind and your body?
Well, part of the answer to that is it may be weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
Or months and months for something. Now that's not the emergency phase.
Right.
But it's long hours. I was awake on duty in the EOC for 40 hours straight during Irma, not healthy. At about half of that, I question my decision-making authority or bandwidth at that point. But we do what we do. But we have to make Billy Abernathy, which works in our shop. I mean, he made him go home, and he's mad.
Yes.
We I
remember him being mad.
We're driven to be there. We want to help, and that's why we do what we do. But we just have to be able to walk away what happened at home. You mentioned our families.
Absolutely.
Before at some point we got to go home and check and make sure everything's good. But it's tough. It's really because you get that adrenaline going, and you just really want to be there and want to see things through to the end. But we have to be intentional.
I think Billy probably drinks hot sauce as his caffeine just to keep himself going and pick himself up. What's your favorite food?
Food, steak.
Steak. Where's your favorite restaurant?
My grill.
Good.
Yeah.
Do you cook for the people out there, or do you have time that you have the ability to cook? I know we did burgers, and different people have come out there, but
in the EOC, no, we if I'm having to cook, then it's probably either a bad day or something has failed.
Right.
But
and it's probably a burger or a hot dog. Or like that.
Yeah. Well, we have a big convection oven. We warm, not cook, to keep the fire marshal happy. But we all pitch in, even in the EOC. Take out the trash, help with make the coffee. The team. It's
everybody helps.
Yeah,
I had noticed that, and I feel blessed that I was able to see the level of cooperation and respect that everybody had for everybody in that whole thing. You a movie buff?
Not really. No. We're binge watching. Actually, we'll binge watch TV series on one of the streaming services. Watching. I think we just finished Friends, and that kind of craziness. But that's how Julie works for city government, and lives are busy, and so that's a way to relax and decompress with silly, meaningless TV.
So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would have liked to? Hey, Todd, I really wanted to make this point as we were talking. There's things that people need to know that I either missed or didn't articulate particularly well.
I think you covered everything that you had on your list.
So when the storm's coming, the most important thing for people to do is pay attention to local media. And when you or whoever says, hey, if you're in this zone, get out or close your windows, close everything, go inside, listen.
Yeah.
And don't be upset if it takes another track, and be thankful that it bypassed you and, is still trying to predict a storm that we don't have any control over.
No, and it just takes, that's probably a good point to add about
complacency.
Well, know something's happening. Hey, I got to watch. I got to take a time out from the day-to-day crazy world that we're in to see what this weather or this incident might do, and how's it going to affect me and my family. If the hurricane is going to be here tomorrow, it is not the time to go. I'm going to run to the store and get some water and get some food, because everybody else has done that too. Plan for that up front. But be patient. You mentioned that before.
Yeah.
I would can testify that local governments and all the partners here in the county are doing everything we can. And we may not have enough. Again, we may not have enough help. Hopefully it's not, we're not going to be a Fort Myers Beach like we saw. And we don't have the storm surge. But, high winds, going to knock down trees, which can knock down power lines or hit houses. And, you could have a brand new house or, whatever. But if you got damage, you got damage.
Right.
And it just takes a while to recover from those things.
Paul, I want to thank you for your leadership at the EOC. I want to thank you for your dedication for all the citizens. I also want to thank your team. I mean, a lot of times you get kudos, but I know you pass those along. But everyone that is out there, everyone that's working, whether county, city, state, people are working to help people out. And again, patience is the key word. You will get to it as soon as possible, and you're not, taking someone over another. It's really kind of by the acuity of who needs it the most, rather than, hey, come fix my tree. No, you got palm fronds, you can do that yourself. We got to get these oak trees out.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for what you do for us, from what I've seen you in action and your whole team out there and everybody in the county. Thank you. And I appreciate you coming by today and talking to us. Hopefully this season will be another light hurricane season, and it'll blow by us and around us and we won't be affected. But it is so nice to know that we've got such dedicated professionals who are paying attention and who are there to assist us in our time of need. So thank you for coming by. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. Appreciate the words and appreciate the time.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. I want to thank you for listening to Todd's podcast. This has been your host, Todd Dantzler. Please stick around next time for the episode with Major General Richard Beef Haddad, who is a United States Air Force retired general. He talks about his time flying in Iraq and Afghanistan. We talk about leadership, some of his leadership style, a little bit about family. So I hope you'll tune in. It's a great episode, and I think you'll really enjoy it. As always, don't forget to rate, review, follow, and subscribe to Todd's podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you have any questions for me or any suggestions for future guests, please call or text our number at 863-288-0944 or visit todddantzler.com. Again, that's 863-288-0944 or visit my website, todddantzler.com. I look forward to hearing your questions and feedback, and please take care.